Our next speaker is Dr. Ashok Gangadin, who is professor and chair of philosophy at Haverford College, where he has taught for the past 39 years. Ashok is a great speaker, and he has been involved in interreligious dialogue for many years. He's founder and director of the Global Dialogue Institute. He has published extensively. Just for the sake of time, I will save the whole bio. It's very much impressive. He has appeared on TV, has a TV program, and he's one of the leading thinkers of our time in the field of global consciousness. And some of his books include, for instance, Meditative Reason Toward Universal Grammar, Between Worlds, The Emergence of Global Reason, and then The Awakening of Global Mind. Please let us welcome Dr. Ashok Gangadin.
Thank you, Mutumu. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this great occasion, because I think this topic in a global village, but also the question of the imperative of interreligious dialogue for our time and the question of world peace is a matter of our survival on the planet. And we know that we're living at a time when the world is shrinking, as the infamous global village, but really what it means from a philosophical point of view, where philosophy is concerned with reality and how our worldviews are formed, and to see that when our diverse worldviews begin to come together more intensively than ever, that is the sense of the global village. And this has been happening through all our evolution. Our worlds have interfaced, and often with violence, because when our worlds come together, we don't have the skills and the competence and the knowledge to find common ground in a humane way while celebrating our diversity and yet discovering unity. That's not been the case. So we get holocausts and terrible genocides and divorces and breakdowns in relations, and we just can't communicate. And we don't realize that we are raised in our culture to shape our lens of our mind. We're not educated in that, and yet our lens is shaped, and everything we see in our world comes through the lens of our culture, our religion, our worldview, our discipline. If we're in the academy, our academic worldview. If I'm a physicist, I see the world from that point of view. And often we have multiple lenses, and we don't even realize that. To be raised as an ordinary American in our culture has many different worldviews. I may be a religious person, and I believe in the Bible, and I honestly believe God created the universe, and that's true to me. And it calls me at every moment of my life to live that truth and worship and love God as the creator of the universe. And yet I'm also a physicist and a scientist, and we know science, and that perspective is profoundly respected and respectable, and it should be. It is attempting to get greater truth and objectivity and experimental evidence and so forth. And if physics teaches us that the Big Bang must be true, that's the only thing that makes sense. So you look out into the cosmos, that's expanding universe. It had to have begun with the Big Bang. So how do I, as a physicist, believe the Big Bang is true, and yet God created the universe? Is it creation, or is it the Big Bang? And so forth. I'm an ordinary American, a civic American, and I believe in democracy and the sacredness of the civic space, and keep religion out of there, separation of church and state. And it makes sense in a way not to impose any particular religion in that ecumenical, open civic space. So something is magnificent about the birth of America as a democratic space. And yet, how do I deal with my religion that says every breath, every moment, worship God and serve God, and yet keep it out of the civic political space? That is a deep split in myself. So of course I'm seeing my therapist to try and solve this problem. I don't know how to deal with my multiple selves here. We have multiple selves: my religious self, my scientific self, my civic American self. So my therapist is teaching me, she's a Jungian, and she's telling me that I have a male and a female in me, anima, animas, and until I get them together, I'm not going to be an individual. And now I'm discovering I have a female energy within me, and it's driving me nuts. So I don't know how to do this, so my self multiplies. I have a tree-hugging friend who teaches yoga, so I'm now chanting Om, and I'm saying Om is going to reduce my stress, and it's all over around the nation. And so I'm chanting Om, and I'm trying to reduce my stress and improve I lose some weight, and but it's not working. And so because it's getting worse, because when I go into the Om world, it's a different world. And myself begins to multiply, and I get more fragmented personalities, and I don't know how to bring it together. I have no inner dialogue, and so I'm in pieces, I'm fragmented. And fortunately, even my friend who is teaching me Feng Shui and said you should work with the Qi energy and bring it together, move your furniture around, and it'll help you. So it's not working, I'm just getting multiplied all the time. You get the picture. So I've got a little PowerPoint I'm going to do for you, because this is an ultimate issue of our survival. If we can't dialogue within ourselves and between ourselves and across our worldviews and across our disciplines in the academic world, we're not going to be able to have a sustainable civilization. Audrey and I are working with the World Commission on Global Consciousness and Spirituality. We have many eminent leaders with us who all recognize that humanity is in a profound moment of shift, an evolutionary shift that has been coming for millennia by all of our great teachers, trying to teach us who we really are. And what does it mean to be really a human being? And can you be a human being if you stayed in your limited, restricted lens of whatever worldview, religion, or culture you've come from? If you think that's the only way to see reality, you are blocking your humanity from maturing. So that the question of opening the global lens has been really foreseen and taught by our great traditions across the planet. Our indigenous traditions have all seen this in some way. And now it's a matter of our survival in our global village. So I'm going to try and lace together in less than 30 minutes, to leave time for Audrey, the question of faith and reason, that they're not incompatible. I'll try to show. I'm going to try and talk about what is global consciousness. How do you open the global lens? And did our teachers of the past and present point to this? What does it mean? And what is dialogue? How do we truly dialogue? What is the imperative of interreligious dialogue, interdisciplinary dialogue, intercultural dialogue, interpersonal dialogue? Dialogue is sacred. What is the imperative of dialogue? And does it really come from our great teachers? So to accelerate 3,000 years of evolution, I'm going to really put up some pictures and create a PowerPoint. And it's really a simple point I wish to make that captures all the, to me, global wisdom, which is the title of my talk. Global wisdom and the grammar of world peace, the grammar, the language, the technology of world peace, and that's really what I want to talk about. By the way, I wanted to thank Mutumbo, who I've known for many years, a really wonderful person who exhibits and embodies a global dialogue. His multiple cultural orientations and languages and training, he's really a model. So thank you, Mutumbo, for having this occasion, and for the campus for supporting all the many sponsors who've put this together. This is very important. So bear with me. I'm going to really show you while I hold this microphone. I usually prefer to have a clip on, so I have a hand free, so hopefully this won't fall over. I'm going to give you a picture that I believe captures the heart of all wisdom from all of our different teachers and brings out the point about faith and reason, the imperative to dialogue, and so forth. Global wisdom, you cannot see, because if you, I'm going to draw two spaces, one here and one here, and try to capture very briefly the struggle of humans to be born, because if you go into any study of logic and philosophy, if you start with the Greek philosophy, for example, but it's across the planet, to think is to predicate. Predication is how you join the logical subject and the predicate, and you make sentences and you form ideas. Socrates is wise, the sun is shining, grass is green, I am a man, and you predicate. To think is to predicate. This is the thought space. And logic is the science of thinking. What are the laws of putting together subject and predicate and putting our thoughts together? And most of us, whatever our culture, I could be raised in my religious world and it would be appearing here in one way. I could learn Buddhist thought, I could look Islam and learn the language of Allah. I can really be whatever it may be, a pagan religion or a Wiccan, whatever it doesn't matter. Well, our worldview is going to show up in that space. And yet, if we stay in that restricted lens, that I'm raised in my lens, and this is not very, I hope you can see this. This is the I, the person. Here is where we are, and there is our screen of our awareness, and our world shows up to us, and we process ourselves here too. Because if you ask, what am I? I'm going to give you my predications. I'm a man, I'm an American, I was born here, this is my parents, I went to school. I give you my whole list of predications, and that is my ID, and that is who I am, and I live my life with it. And it could be that I am a Jew, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a scientist, I'm American, whatever it is, whatever my ID, and I have multiple IDs, it's all going to be processed in that information. But if you could step back from that for a moment, this is not the global lens, this is the local lens of my culture, right? Whatever that lens is that I have, that I've been shaped through my culture, which is wonderful. I mean, my history, my mother, my father, my siblings taught me my culture, my education, you know, the campus taught me how to think and how to learn these languages. That's my education. But if we can't step back from this and say, is there a larger picture to connect? Right? That's what opening the global mind, the global lens is all about. So if you step back from any one culture, you know, whether it be whatever the great culture is, the Judaic, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Buddhist, the Wiccan, the pagan, all of them, science, and open a deeper space. That's what I'm pointing to here. The global space, the global village, the global humanity, global citizens, human beings. This is where we belong. So if you step back from this and ask, what has been going on the planet with our great teachers all these thousands of years? You would go into the Chinese mind and they would say that the Tao, I wish I could get something that isn't. I'll change my color code, don't be confused, I'm going blue. Right? The Tao that is named is not the Tao. The great seers saw that there is a deep ground, a force of reality. Every culture, every human being has this within her and him. And however the culture tries to name this in the highest teaching, they realize that the ordinary technology of thinking is not powerful enough. The language here, the consciousness here is not powerful enough to express this infinite force. And yet this is what rules. You can't get around it. There's a fundamental force. You can call it in the Greek the Logos. And the word Logos is very important for Greek philosophy. It means a word, speech, mind, thought, consciousness, all of these meanings in the Logos. Very important in the whole European tradition because everything has the logic, the Logos, right? Philosophy, psychology, astronomy, all of these, nomos and Logos is science, is reason. So the heart of all wisdom has to do with the Logos. So Heraclitus, early before Socrates, Heraclitus, who saw that everything is process, says in one of his fragments, listen not to me but to the Logos, and know that all things are one, unquote. Amazing to say for a great genius, Heraclitus, who was giving birth to philosophy. But if you go into the Hindu grammar, it's Om. Meditate on Om. The great seers of the yogis and the seers, they saw into the ultimate forces vibrating with this power of the infinite word. Again, the word. The Logos is the word. Tao is the name. Om. Meditate on Om. Then you become fully human. You can't put your Om here. And if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it is all of Hindu wisdom is about how do I cross from separation, because this space is separated from this connected space. And so if I live in the box here and I make myself here, and Arjuna on the battlefield, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, it starts a dialogue. Arjuna is at war in the great epic, the Mahabharata. Arjuna is about to enter a war with his own family. He sees his cousins and his teachers and his uncles on the other side of the battle. And Krishna, the voice of Om, Krishna is the infinite force. Who is this charioteer who's going to guide him? And Arjuna looks at his other family and is a war hero. He's a great hero. And he knows the ethic of the warrior is to go to war no matter what. And yet he sees, when he sees his own family, he drops his weapon. And he says, Krishna, I cannot kill my own people. This is not right. Help me. And he drops his weapon. That's a midlife crisis. It's going to come when you're living in this space. It's going to split because you are split off and you're not connected. Krishna, this voice of Krishna speaking here, has a dialogue. If you read the Bhagavad Gita, it's a dialogue across these two channels. And what is the dialogue? Krishna understands as the voice of Om, the intelligence, integral. And this is where we're going to hear faith and reason. Because when you come into this space, if you can learn the technology of thinking in this space and leave this more adolescent stage of separation and fragmentation, we don't understand what this calculus of the mind does. This mind program breaks fragments, and it ultimately leads to 9/11s, genocide, Holocaust, divorces, breakdowns, and the split of Arjuna on the battle. Your midlife crisis is going to come because this place is not sustainable. Because it's coming out of the deep connection, and if you break the connection, if you break this line is extremely important. It's called different things in different traditions. It's called sin in the Judaic tradition, the fall of Adam from connectivity into separation, the temptation for the fruit of the object of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We can be as God. The ego that stands separate from this place tries to put itself as a separate being, having my own being. I'm God. You know, it's very arrogant to be an ego, because you're plagiarizing. You couldn't ego without this force. And you disown it and pretend you're on your own, and you use this calculus, and you don't realize this calculus, and if you process yourself here, this is getting messy. But it's a messy situation. I'll turn the page in a moment and give you a break, but the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna is amazing, because Krishna knows that Arjuna doesn't even realize the calculus he's using. So the first stage of chapter 2 is, check this out. If it's being, you can't kill it. If it's becoming, what's the point? If it's born, it's going to die. But enough of that, Arjuna. Let us do the real thing. Let us do yoga. And yoga is the ability to step back from this calculus, become aware of it critically, and realize that you don't have to be in that box of your particular frozen lens. You don't have to be a bundle of this karmic energy that keeps you in samsara. That you can really let go of it through the science of yoga. Science, again, reason, science, and let go in all of the different pathways of your life to enter into the Om space. All of that, centuries of science. And the great Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, great, that's like pure geometry. He begins it, Yogas Chittam Vritti Nirodhaha. Yoga is the quieting of predication. Stop thinking and start being, and entering into the Om space. And all of this great yoga teaching is a science of retooling yourself into that space. That's just one example. I'm going to give you examples of Abraham and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad. All of these geniuses were speaking from the deep space. And they saw that humanity, in our evolution, if you get stuck here, you are pre-human. To come be fully human, to be a moral being, a scientific being, a full global citizen, you have to open your global lens, which is what brings you into connection with the fundamental force, whatever name you call it. So all of the names we have, Shunyata, Buddha's Great Awakening, a great moment in history. He had the Hindu background. He knew the Om language, but he didn't want to talk about Om and Atman and Brahman. He wanted to clear us out so we can enter this space. So when Buddha went on his journey, he said, why do humans suffer so much? And we're still suffering today, more than ever. He saw that existence is suffering. When he woke up, in his great, Buddha means awakened one. When he woke up, he saw deeply into the structure of reality and the calculus of the mind. And he was a physician. He prescribed it. He saw it. He diagnosed it. But we still haven't gotten it. Existence is suffering. The Four Noble Truths. Existence is suffering. Ego existence. It has a cause. Our fixation, obsession, our hang-up on attachment to our identity and our separate being. We have a choice. We don't have to use this calculus. We don't have to process ourselves as an entity, as a being, as an object. It's deadly. We can retool our minds, and that's the Eightfold Path of right action, right judgment, right thinking, right interpretation, right practice. All of the 8 channels of our living in the world, retool it, rehabilitate your mind. Kick the habit. Don't be an egoholic. You don't have to be. You can become a being that is connected. Here's where dialogue comes in. You can't be a dialogue being if you're frozen in your mind. If I say I'm a Muslim and this is the truth, Allah is the only name, and that, or Yahweh is the only name, or Christ is the only truth. I am Christian and this is the truth, right? And I will die for that. No, it's science. The Big Bang is the only truth, right? Whatever language you're speaking with the best intentions, if you're using this calculus, you're using a method, a mind program that separates, fragments, breaks, and everything breaks in here. Space, separate from time, cause, substance, motion, figure, texture, all of these pieces. Mind and matter. Mind and body. I'm split. The mind is different from the body. I can't have mind-body medicine, mind-body healing. The point I want to do in a very accelerated way, I mean, it would take several kind of talks to say, so why is this calculus breaking and fragmenting and always leads to polarity? Why in this space has there been a chronic split between the finite and the infinite, the one and the many, the same and the different, the universal and the particular? All of the down the line, and culture has been trying to repair and connect these two in the space, and it fails. And yet the wisdom of the planet, all of this wisdom, the founding of the ultimate name is Yahweh. In the founding of this great Judaic tradition of Abraham and his struggle, hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. Love God with all your heart. Don't even write Yahweh. You always hear that restriction. Don't write it. Shunyata means emptiness. But the emptiness that Buddha saw was the fullness of connection. The emptiness of this structures and construction. When you drop this, you enter and find yourself in the flow of deep connectivity, and it's infinite. You can't get out of the infinite force. It's everywhere at every moment. So Buddha saw, he called it pratitya samutpada, co-arising. Everything co-arises with everything else in the universe. It's a holistic interconnectivity. It's deep science. Here, if you put that point here, here's the pen. What is the pen? Oh, it's a piece of plastic. It's blue. It's for writing. I'm holding it. I toss it away when I'm finished. It's just a pen. You put yourself here too. If you could perform a miracle, watch me now carefully, because I'm going to put the pen into this space. And it's going to be amazing. When you put it into the infinite space, behold the pen. Imagine it was found on Mars by the explorer picks this pen up, and which is the biggest news in the whole American scheme. There's a pen on Mars, right? Why? Because the pen gives the information of the evolution of all culture. It tells everything about humanity in this information. When you take it from the box and you put it into the open, connected space, everything is interconnected with everything else. So too for us. If you put I here, I'm disconnected. I'm broken off. I can't even get, a good relationship with my spouse. We're fighting. We're going to get a divorce. The children are arguing. The house is broken, right? Over and over. I can't deal with the other religion. I'm a Jew. How do I deal with the Christians and the Muslims? Can't do it. Right? How do I deal with my citizens in the civic space? I'm a Republican. They're a Democrat. I'm pro-choice. They're pro-life. And battles and battles and we don't know how to dialogue with the multiple worlds we have. Each world here is a separate world. I hope you see that. I'm sorry this is so messy. This is not a good village. I mean, here's a global village. This is the place where wars happen. And they chronic wars. And the reason why we can't get our worlds together is our worlds are profoundly different. Diversity is profound. And if you put diversity here, it's glorious and sacred. Diversity is real. But we don't understand diversity when you put it in the space of atomic separation. It's false diversity. And our campuses are overwritten with multiculturalism, as is our society. We're a multicultural society. If you have unity, it's not your unity. What's the unity of America? Is it the Christian world? No, it's not. How about the Asian? How about the Hawaiian? Those dancers were fantastic. And so you're down with unity and up with diversity. And what is diversity? This atomic separation. And we go into our different enclaves. So in the campus, the African Americans are over here, Latinos are there, and they're all in there, let's say, with little IDs. And they don't know how to talk to one another, and there's no culture, there's no we the people, there's no America. When Martin Luther King said, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the other side, I may not get there with you, but there's a day coming when the black man and the white man and the Gentile and the Jew will come together. But that's the space, this deep space. This is America here. So when you go across a spectrum of all of these great worldviews, I'm going to wind up now, Audrey. This is just to provoke you so that Audrey can come and help. You see the pattern. So Allah is the infinite name. Right? Muhammad comes out to the biblical, the Abraham and Jesus. That's his lineage. The children of Abraham, Jews and Christians and Muslims, they come from the same God. So how can you embrace Jesus? Who is Jesus? All of it. So when Abraham struggled with this ultimate moment of history, when God called him, put me first, that's the imperative to dialogue, to enter the space of connectivity. Put me first, that's all I ask. And he has his Isaac, that's my son. I finally have a son. I want him. You asked me to let go and sacrifice in God. So the pull to this space or the pull to that, that's the great question. Are we going to honor what is first and honor it, put it first and live in that way? Which means I've got to give up my own arrogance of separation and my own ID as ultimate and go into this humble space of connectivity with the other. That's the space of dialogue. This is monologue, ego-log. It's not real dialogue. Just if I sit with you and I talk from my lens and tell you my truth and you tell me mine, Maha was talking about that too. It's not dialogue. It's monologue. It takes deep risk to dare to step back from your privileging your world and open yourself and open that space that's here to go into dialogue. So when Abraham said, I'm going to put this first, I will sacrifice my son, it was done. That was the sacrifice. He didn't have to kill him. He let go of the identity. He let go of his agenda. When we let go of our ego, and this is the path all the teachers have taught. Jesus, I think, was exactly this, the Logos in the flesh. And when he talked this language, it was not here. When he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I and the Father are one. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was hungry, you fed me. He meant here. The self and the other are so connected. You cannot separate the self from the other. Here, the self is split from the other. So many philosophers and wisdom keepers have said, when you objectify the other person in this space, you treat them as an object. Even if you're writing a Valentine's card and you say, you're the greatest thing that ever happened to me, you should smack him for that. I'm not an object, I'm a person. What is a person? A person is an open, sacred being that isn't locked into a certain box, but is open to connectivity with the other, with other religions, other perspectives, with nature. And the Wiccans are seeing that nature is sacred. It is sacred, because everything here is sacred. So I'm going to wrap this up. But you get the picture that I could keep going and talk about all our great traditions, and they're all teaching in different languages. I'm not saying they're the same. When you go into this deep space, it's profoundly open for diversity. Each one of us is a miracle, absolute miracle. Each one of us holds a... Why? Because the infinite space has infinite possibilities of diversity. And diversity does not war with unity. This unity, you have to choose unity or diversity. But when you go into the deep space, unity is filled with diversity. And that's where you can have sacred individuality. You could become an individual out of the box and discover who you really are. That's the human being, that's a person. And that's where ethics happens. When you see yourself in the other and treat the other as yourself, that is a sacred law that all of our traditions, our global wisdom is moving from the ego wisdom, which is broken, to the whole deep space in which you can see those great truths that a true person, what it means to be a person, and our heritage, right, requiring this rite of passage which is like a deep sacrifice. Jesus says, unless you die, you can't be born again. All the teachers said that. Buddha was saying that you've got to sacrifice the ego, let go of your ID in order to become a whole human being. So I'm going to sum this up now. I think you see the message, and that what I've done over the years as a teacher is, this is such an important point that our students and our children and our adults need to know, am I using this program or this one? And you noticed I used double brackets here, right? I'm going to make this now cleaner and stuff. And this is going to be the sum up. I use single strokes. When you're in this, whatever word you're speaking, in this space, whatever word you speak, mark it. Mark it with single, like quotation marks. I use single strokes to say, we better know whether I'm thinking and living in this space, because all of our global wisdom has taught us, be careful, be wary, and be aware. Become critically aware. Am I using this calculus? And if you can cross into this space, I use double parentheses, almost like the infinite space of any word, double parentheses. There is a world of difference between being in this calculus and this, and we're meant to speak this calculus. All of our teachers were speaking it. When Descartes did this great experiment and said, I can doubt everything here, and yet he said, I am, I exist. What am I don't know. He touched into this space. He didn't have the vocabulary, he didn't have the technical information and technology to express it. So he went right back into the only language we know. We take this deep truth of all of our traditions and scriptures and download it into the language form that we are accustomed to, despite the teaching that there's a deeper way to use language. And we've got to learn it to become human and to survive on the planet. So I use the double parentheses to mark the deep space of global wisdom. This is the global lens. And this is where you become a human being, a global citizen. This is where you become a full person. This is where ethics happens, and knowledge, and science happens. And science is beginning to knock on this door in terms of butterfly effect and non-locality in nature. Nature is an infinite calculus. And we need a higher order mind program to deal with it. Science needs this calculus to handle nature and truth and fact. So I'm going to stop. And I'll basically say, my students would say, Professor Gangadeen, I see this, but it's so hard to go from here, where I am in my culture, into that space. How do I get there? The more I try to be enlightened or awakened, the more I get stuck in my ego. And all the teachers knew that. You have to let go. You don't push into it to do that. And I explained to them this, and this is going to be the final point. You are never outside of this space. I use the word logos from the Greek, whatever you call it, Om, Yahweh, Allah, Christ, energy, Nomo in the African tradition, the pagan name, all of the names, whatever, it's an infinite name. I use the word logos, but written this way, not the old way, right? And you're always surrounded by the logos. And whatever culture and identity you carry, and it could be multiple, as we saw, the path of becoming a human is to have the courage to become critically aware of these structures and to step back from this into the space that you're already surrounded. You are always in the space of the Logos. You could never step outside of the infinite field. And it's fully within you, each of us. And it's terrifying to face the infinite within ourselves. So that it says there's that of God in every person. What does that mean? The infinite is in you. The infinite is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Of course, it's always present. It's not far away. The Zen philosophy is all about wake up to this now moment. Not the ego now, but this now. If you could enter into time, real time, and not ego time. I'm running out of time. I'm way out of time. This is my final remark. Ego time is broken, past, present, future, and I get caught in them, in the brokenness. If you can cross into this powerful moment, any point here is extremely, this is the power point. If you could enter into now, it is infinitely connected with all of the moments. And that's where you find being. And all Zen philosophies, be here now. All the Hindu philosophy, be here now. All the Christ teaching calls us into Christ consciousness in this moment. And that's when we're connected. That's deep dialogue. That's what we need to do to bring our worlds together, because our worlds come out of a deep source with all of their rich diversity, which should be honored. And dialogue is the way in which we do it. And dialogue is the technology in which I can hold my space but open to you. Your work, whether it's a work of art, whether it's nature, the sunset, whether it's another religion, whatever it is, I can enter into deep dialogue. That's a skill of dialogue. So I'll conclude on that point. I hope I've provoked you, and I'll turn it over to Matumbo. Thank you.
Our last talk comes from Miss Audrey Kitagawa, who works at the United Nations. She was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, and she is a cum laude graduate of the University of Southern California and a graduate of Boston College Law School. What is interesting is that she practiced law in Honolulu for 20 years, and at the time of her retirement in 1996, she had the highest rating for professional and ethical excellence in the legal profession, something which is rare. You know many jokes on lawyers. There is one joke, I tell that quickly. See, if they put you in a room with Hitler, Saddam Hussein, Mussolini, etc., they give you a gun with 2 bullets only. Who do you shoot if you want to fight evil? The response is you shoot the lawyer twice. But you see that she did just the opposite. So the highest rating, for professional and ethical excellence, which means there is still hope for lawyers in our world. She has the Light of Awareness, which is an international spiritual family, a non-denominational, ecumenical spiritual community. She's a former advisor to the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the UN for Children and Armed Conflict at the United Nations. She is currently a special advisor to the World Federation of United Nations Association, and she's chairperson of the NGO Committee on Spirituality, Values, and Global Concerns. Without further ado, Ms. Audrey Kitagawa.
Well, thank you so much, Matumbo. Okay, I'll just. How about both? I'm a 2-mic person. Oh no, Matumbo, you're walking away with my speech.
I have mine here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, Matumbo, we're here to talk about interreligious dialogue as a pathway to peace. But, telling lawyer jokes, and especially guns and killing them with 2 bullets is not an auspicious way to begin this dialogue. So I guess the dialogic process is definitely not for lawyers. That is, if Matumbo had his way. But be careful, remember this, everybody needs a good lawyer. And when you ever get to that point when you need a lawyer, you'll be very happy we exist. Well, thank you so much, Ashok. I always enjoy so much listening to Ashok's presentation because literally he is like poetry in motion. And whenever he sends me these emails, he likes to put certain things in the double brackets so that he will know that he is talking from the logosphere, from the infinite oneness. But the thing when you work with Ashok is that you have to understand his language because you can misinterpret it, which is why it's so important that we all understand the grammar and have the technology of the logosphere. So he said something very important. So if we were to look at this chart here, the messy chart, talking about the subject and the predicate, and how how this portion here creates all the problems. And he's right. And when Ashok sends me emails, and if I am not in the same language with him and understand what he's talking about, when he sends me emails and says, "Hello, sweetheart," he's sure to put it in the double brackets, because if I don't understand what he's talking about, I'll interpret it here and take it very personally, and then think that he is addressing me as his sweetheart. So if I don't understand the double brackets, either Ashok's going to be in trouble, or I'm going to be in trouble, or we both will be in trouble. So we all have to get on the same page and understand what he means when he's talking about being here. And ultimately, when we ascend to the logosphere, the subject and the object and all predication actually disappears, because in the oneness, there is no self and the other. The other is the self. And so in knowing that, Ashok and I are eternally one. So now I have been asked to specifically talk about the United Nations and religious communities within the United Nations. And so now this talk is primarily going to be about this. Because this is the world of the United Nations, where there's multiplicity, multiple stakeholders, individuation, a sense of separation, the sense of sovereignty, and independent nations, and each having their own agenda, very much egoing and pushing their agenda through this international organization. And I've specifically, because I'm talking about religions in the UN, you'll bear with me, and towards the end of my presentation, hopefully we'll be able to understand how we can move as individuals who may be acting on the global stage, move into the logosphere that Ashok has been talking about. And we'll also do a little experiment at the end. So you have to hang around to get the experiment. Is that a good hook to keep you here? So I just want to say that it really is a joy to be back at this campus and to see so many wonderful, familiar faces. And I, as a concluding speaker, wanted to express my appreciation to the many people who have made this Global Village presentation possible. But Dr. Mutumbu has already taken that opportunity for me, so I won't repeat the many wonderful persons as well as organizations who have made this event possible. But I did want to especially acknowledge Professor Mutumbu, because he has been such a wonderful friend for so many years. And he has contributed so much, not only to this campus through his brilliant scholarship, but directly into the lives of many people through the gentleness and the kindness of his spirit. So thank you so much, Mutumbu. You are a joy. And I also wish to acknowledge Ashok Gangadeen, because we are on many panels and commissions together, and he also has been a very wonderful friend. And I always get disappointed when his lectures and his talks conclude, because really it is a privilege to be able to listen to such articulate poetry in action, and I always consider it such a privilege. And he is acknowledged as one of the outstanding professors and educators by not only his students, but of course now by all of us who have had the privilege to hear him speak. So thank you so much, Ashok. And I also wish to acknowledge my beautiful spiritual community who fill every venue with such love, by your very presence, and who brought to us this morning the wonderful songs and dances of Hawaii. And last but certainly not least, I wish to acknowledge all of the members in this audience for taking your precious time to be here this morning. I've been asked to speak about the paths of liberation from violence, a dialogue between world religions and the United Nations. And there is really no more relevant time in our history to observe the role of religions on the global stage. More and more states, as well as local, national, and international organizations and institutions, are really beginning to recognize the importance of engaging religious communities in finding solutions to the complexities of our global challenges. But why is engaging with religious communities so important? Well, let's look at some of the figures, some of which you've already heard from Mutumbu, regarding the numbers of people who are involved in religious communities. As he stated, our world population is approximately 6.5 billion people. And of these, Christianity is the largest religion with more than 2.1 billion adherents worldwide. And within Christianity itself, there are more than 33,000 denominations. So you can really understand that if we are in the single bracket category, that there can be many difficulties, not only across religions, but within religion itself. Islam is one of the world's fastest growing religions, with more than 1.34 billion Muslims worldwide. And it is the state religion of 25 countries. Hinduism is the world's third largest religion, with over 950 followers, most all of whom are in South Asia. And the majority live in India, which is 80% Hindu. More than half of the world's population live in countries where Buddhism is now or has been dominant. Buddhists represent approximately 6% of the world's population, with 376 million adherents. And Judaism has over 13 million followers, with 5 million of them living in Israel. There are other traditional religions as well as new religious movements, and I have just concentrated on giving to you the facts and figures with respect to the largest religions. But now comes a question. What are the implications regarding the influence of religions in the world, with most of its people belonging to faith traditions? Joanne O'Brien and Martin Palmer, in the introduction to their book, The Atlas of Religion, write, "It was a fond hope of many secular ideologies in the last 100 years that religion will wither and die in light of social and technological advancements. From Marxism to fascism, the expectation was that religion would be thrown aside as an emotional and intellectual prop that would no longer be needed. This expectation was largely turned on its head during the last 20 years. From the proclamations in the 60s that God is dead, we see instead that ideologies have faded, but religions have flourished. Religious communities have also proved to be more sustainable than nation states. And I'll give you an example. Zambia gained independence in 1964. The schools, colleges, health networks, and hospitals and clinics were run by the churches and the mosques, but they were all nationalized. But when the Zambian government failed, it meant that many of these institutions, often in the state now of physical and economic collapse, were handed back to the churches and the mosques to run. So these religious communities prove to have greater competence than the government that nationalized them. And the flip side of the return of the role of religion has been a growth in religiously inspired violence. While it is true to say that the majority of the last 100 years saw secular ideologies attacking religions, today that has been replaced by religions attacking secular societies or waging war on other religious communities and identities. The recent rise of terrorists claiming to act in the name of religion, the resurgence of religious conflict in a previously stable and multi-faith Indonesia, the role of militant Buddhists in Sri Lanka's long-running civil war underlines exactly why we all need to know and understand more about the religious nature of the world today. And one of the things that I wish to point out is all of the violence that is taking place in the name of religion. We have to understand how it is that these communities can be so politicized, and also the role of the media in exacerbating the politicization process of the religious communities to give them the face of violence. If anything, the tremendous adaptability of religion is one of its key features, and religions are able to convince us that they are unchanging, yet they survive and spread precisely because they are constantly adapting. This ability to adapt, especially in today's globalized world, has brought a tremendous rise in the ethical investment movement by religious communities. As such, they wield considerable economic clout. The combined investments of the major religions are estimated to be $7 trillion. O'Brien and Palmer state, the ethical investment movement began in the 1960s during the struggle for civil rights in the United States. But churches opposed to apartheid system in South Africa withdrew certain investments, and in 1974, the first purely Islamic bank opened, offering an alternative to conventional banking that was based on the Quranic ban on the taking and charging of interest. By 2000, the emphasis within the churches was to combine disinvestment with active investment in socially responsible companies, which produced a good return, supported employment rights, and were environmentally sustainable. So now we not only have the huge population base as a formidable movement in the world, but also it is now linked to a formidable economic power. In 2005, 3IG, the International Interfaith Investment Group, was founded. And it was very interesting to see how the issue of finances itself became a linking point between different religious groups, because it is this investment group that was able to bring together in rather rapid time finance managers from different religions and linked Buddhists, Christians, Taoists, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, and Sikhs in ways that political processes could not bring them together. So meanwhile, Islamic banking too has become so significant that many of the secular banks offer Islamic banking facilities. But the question now becomes, how do religions interface with the United Nations? Well, considering that so many of the world's peoples belong to a religion, and in recognition of the fact that religious congregants hold tremendous economic sway, how could the United Nations ignore this viable, vibrant force? Although the United Nations as a secular institution has taken quite a long time to recognize religions, It is slowly awakening to the fact that religious communities cannot be excluded. And actually, when we examine the history of the United Nations, we do find that religions and religious groups have been involved in the UN since its inception. And the first comprehensive analysis of religion at the UN was released on April 3rd, 2002 at UN headquarters by a panel representing diverse religions. And they issued a report called Religions and Public Policy at the UN. And this was, which indicated that the drafting of the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights included contributions from a group known today as the World Council of Churches. And among the first non-governmental organizations present in the formative stages of the UN were the precursors to the US-based National Council of Churches, the American Jewish Congress, and the Synagogue of America. So we can see that there has been some direct influence from religious communities in the inception and formative stages of the UN. At least 15 religious NGOs, 10 Christian, 5 Jewish, were granted ECOSOC, or Economic and Social Council consultative status with the United Nations in the first 4 years. In 1957, then UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld opened the meditation room at the UN, calling it a place where the doors may be open to the infinite lands of thought and prayer. And from these small beginnings, by the year 2000, we see that the NGO community has begun to flourish, where now there are well over 2,000 NGOs. However, of this amount, approximately 180 are religious NGOs. But of these religious NGOs, we find that the largest category is comprised of Christians, primarily the Roman Catholics. The report also went on to say that the UN does not promote any one religion in allowing participation by many religions. And neither does the UN promote religion per se, but rather it accepts religion as one worldview among others in the forum of international activity. And the UN includes the religious voice without privileging it. A high-ranking UN official pointed out that religious NGOs have every right to be in the panorama of the UN, just as much as other NGOs there. However, this right of participation is contingent. And if they do not follow the basic rules of the UN, then of course they are invited to leave. And this unnamed official said that he has not noticed an overabundance of religious NGOs or religious extremism in the UN. Religions have much to offer the UN, and people, because religious communities have helped to codify the fundamental ethics by which people seek to have better lives. However, not being naive, this unnamed official also said, organized religion has, in fact, been responsible for many wrongdoings in the world. But the power of religion should be harnessed for international peace and security. Deeper than the religious communities having consultative or affiliate status with the UN is a growing recognition by the UN itself, as well as its agencies, of the need to engage communities of faith. In 2000, the UN allowed the General Assembly Hall to be used as the convening venue for the World Millennium Peace Summit, which had many of the most respected religious and spiritual leaders in the contemporary world present. However, the Dalai Lama was not invited because of potential tensions with China. The summit symbolized the growing presence of religion and religious groups at the UN. And in further recognition of the growing presence of religion at the UN, as well as on the global landscape, the Conference on Interfaith Cooperation for Peace at the UN headquarters in June 22 of 2005 recommended the creation of an open-ended consultative group composed of representatives of the UN, member states, the UN system of NGOs. So it was then called the Tripartite Forum on Interfaith Cooperation for Peace. And this forum was created out of this growing recognition of the importance of having to create avenues of dialogue specifically with the religious community. And the mission of this tripartite forum is to explore practical measures utilizing interfaith dialogue and cooperation to advance understanding between diverse peoples, their cultures and religions in order to foster mutual respect, tolerance, and friendship. And the goal of this forum is to deliberate on an open-ended basis how interfaith dialogue and cooperation can contribute to effectively address opportunities and challenges for peaceful coexistence. And I also wanted to share that just before I came on this trip, I received an email from the special advisor to the President of the General Assembly. She sent the program and background for thematic debate of the General Assembly on civilizations and the challenges of peace, which will be an upcoming event. And the main objective of the informal thematic debate is to unravel the reasons behind the increasing levels of mistrust between people of different religions and cultures, and to ask why cultural and religious differences are increasingly used to describe and justify conflicts. So now we are seeing that the UN is really waking up to the issue of the role of religions and the need to establish these avenues of dialogue. So we want to be able, and one of the 4 themes that will be discussed is specifically called Religion in Contemporary Society. And the advisory that was issued about these thematic debates specifically said, religious fundamentalism poses a serious threat to peaceful relations and understanding among peoples and nations. The challenge today is to ensure that religious freedoms and beliefs, fundamental human rights, do not contribute to the rejection of those who are different, to social domination, or even violence. Yes, in a world of increasing diversity, where more and more peoples of different religions and cultural backgrounds are living together, it really is crucial that social policies encourage religious and cultural interactions in a free, respectful, and tolerant environment. The discussions should emphasize programs at local and multicultural levels, promoting knowledge of and interaction between religions of different backgrounds and belief. And UN agencies itself, and in particular is the World Bank, have acknowledged the importance of communities of faith by convening religious leaders annually to engage them in dialogue about religious issues. And James Wolfson, the former president of the World Bank, said, "Faith leaders have long-standing and consistent on-the-ground experience, often working steadfastly despite extreme conditions. They have a deep and complex perspective to offer. In many cases, they can bring the voices of the poor to the table in powerful ways. Listening and learning from faith communities throughout the world has helped me and has helped the great potential and has the great potential to help the World Bank as a whole appreciate that material development must be complemented by other, less tangible aspects of development." And while he did not use the word, the logos, He did say community cohesion, choice and opportunity to reach one's potential and core values that define the moral and spiritual underpinnings of individual and community welfare, truly translating the mission of the World Bank to help bring about a world free of poverty into successful and sustainable improvement in people's lives requires taking these aspects into account. So United Nations and its agencies comprise the only global organization of its kind. And really, it is encouraging to see that it is now stepping into the shoes of moderator and facilitator of the dialogue between communities of faith and the other constituents in this world, which is a huge, complex, living organism of diverse and multiple stakeholders. Now, there was a lot of words and a lot of statistics to chew on. But what does this all mean for the individual, for each person present in this room? You know, these deliberative dialogic processes, especially at the level of the UN, unfolds ever so slowly. And while we can appreciate the fact that these multilateral processes, especially undertaken under the auspices of the UN, are designed to embrace universal values and uphold the principles set forth in the preamble to the UN Charter, we must recognize that often great changes occur in small increments over eons. But what do we do in the face of so many challenges which we confront today and are pressed with a heightened sense of urgency as we become more aware through the sophistication of information technologies that bring us in real time the sufferings and tragedies that are taking place all over the world, from which we no longer can be shielded? We find it increasingly difficult to be patient. We feel the brevity of time in being able to come to terms with the seemingly compounding complexities of global problems. But ultimately, what will be our saving grace? I say that what will be our saving grace is the individual's capacity of self-reflection and inner inquiry, an interior call to search for the deeper meaning and purpose of life. The answer to this call inaugurates a sacred journey that helps us to remember the reality of who we are. That we are spiritual beings with spiritual purposes, and our first purpose is to realize the divine source that is already within us, and to remember our eternal union with it. In the remembrance of our true identity lies the heart of compassion, love, and equanimity. This heart has the transformative power to heal the scars and wounds which the ignorance of the ego inflicts. The ego operates in the paradigm of power, domination, and control without regard to the needs and condition of others. So when Professor Gangadeen's students ask, but how do I get into the logosphere? How do I move from the single bracket to the double bracket? Then I would say that it is through the power of the heart. The power of the heart. And to become a truly global citizen means growing into the fullness of our own spiritual lives that finds at its source a state of transcendence in which no religions exist or isms of any kind, and yet is the wellspring from which all religions arise. It also means exercising our ability to actualize the divine in our lives daily through our own thoughts, speech, and actions that are in alignment with the spiritual laws of harmony, balance, peace, and love. And these are the qualities of the infinite source of which Professor Gangadeen spoke. So true activism in this world walks the sacred journey, a journey of respect for oneself and others, and moves with a mindfulness in the world that keeps one's head bowed with humility, that enables one to hear that still, small voice of the divine that is already within us and ever whispers its guidance on how to live in the ways of love. I had the privilege of studying with an enlightened master who often asked this one question: can you love the unlovables? Her question has taken on deeper significance over the years, a koan's meaning slowly revealing itself in the endless attempts to practice its answer at every opportunity. We can have all the dialogues on peace, but we must know peace within our own hearts first. If we have reached into our own capacity to develop the heart of compassion and caring for others and to live life in the fulfillment of our higher purposes, we will know the essence of love itself, the fruit of which will bring us this inner peace. Albert Camus said, "I know of only one duty, and that is to love." The fulfillment of that one duty is to live life fully awake. To live life fully awake is to have fulfilled one's ultimate responsibility as a member of the human family. And this is where we find the convergence of faith and reason, the recognition of our spiritual selves and its duty to activate and apply its raison d'etre in the world in which we live. My spiritual master said, "Where we are is the holy ground, and we must find God here." Then may we find God within the sacred chamber of our own hearts, and in the development of our hearts to actualize in our daily lives and put into practice loving kindness, compassion, nonviolence, and peace. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is to truly know heaven on earth. And Ashok had spoken about the Om, and it should not stay just as a mental concept, but that we can experience the resonant, powerful vibration of this Om at any time and in the here and now. And in fact, let's all experience this together as members of the human family. And I invite you all to say with me 3 times the beautiful Om. And let's all say peace together 3 times. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining all of us today. And now we have experienced the infinite peace of Logos. Thank you.